Joining us, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, is with us. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing well, but this is a very sad day for the rule of law in America, and I think is going to pose to the American people some very difficult choices. Calista and I were sitting here watching the director go through his list, and the longer he went, the more convinced I was he was going to announce an indictment.
So was I.
And so and I don't know what Comey was doing. I mean, I don't understand how he constructed this, because he actually made the case for the indictment and then flinched it in the last 2 minutes. And you know, if the Comey standard is going to exist, then Obama needs to go back and pardon a number of people who've been convicted of lesser offenses than Hillary Clinton. I mean, there are a number of people who've been convicted for gross negligence. They've lost their security clearance. In some cases, they've been fined a substantial amount of money. In some cases, they've gone to jail. But for Comey to claim that he could not find any precedent for prosecuting, he just has to look at the record of the Justice Department, starting with Bill Clinton. And in the last 23 years, we've had a substantial number of espionage cases. And it's clear, and I just watched Rudy Giuliani on Fox walking through as a former federal prosecutor, that Comey's use of the language, you know, that she was, in effect, extremely sloppy, fits precisely the term for gross negligence.
Well, he used extreme carelessness, gross negligence. What's the difference?
There is none. That was Giuliani's point. That is the textbook legal case for gross negligence. And to say on the one hand, we clearly found that she was guilty of gross negligence, that her senior staff was guilty of gross negligence. Here are the cases, and as you pointed out, special access programs are the highest level of secrecy. She risked several of those. A number of the documents actually were labeled classified, so her entire case there is a lie. A number of other documents, Comey is saying she should have known. He then points out that her lawyers didn't even read the substance of the emails that they were eliminating. And you go down this list, and this is exactly why the American people are furious. This is the same kind of elite escaping the law that happened with the big banks in 2007 and 2008. It makes us look like a banana republic to be able to say, gee, as long as you're the presidential nominee, and notice, by the way, the timing. She just happens to be on Air Force One with the president while the director of the FBI is saying that she will not be indicted. Now, I'm sure there was no collusion, but boy, the timing sure looks sick.
Sure looks sick, too. What did you make of Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton's meeting that just happened late last week, and then the timing of her being interviewed, which I figured was the end of the process? I thought they would interview her last, and then, of course, Comey's announcement today, the day after the 4th of July, when a lot of us are usually off.
Everything that has happened from the time Bill Clinton went on the airplane with the Attorney General, totally inappropriate, up through Comey just now, all of this is why the American people think Washington is corrupt, and that if you're powerful enough, you can get away with anything. And this will convince nobody who's reasonable that Hillary Clinton is not guilty. In fact, given the way Comey laid out the case, it's going to convince a lot of Democrats that clearly something profoundly wrong went on here.
You know, I don't mean to interrupt you, but think of just what we've seen in the last 2 weeks. I mean, this woman lies with regularity. There were 600 separate requests by people in Benghazi at the very time the Red Cross and the Brits were getting out because of security concerns. They were denied every single time, even ones that went directly to her. During the attack, she was in the highest meeting, the highest cabinet official in the meeting, and they're discussing whether or not they need Libya's permission to save Americans. And then they're arguing about whether or not we can send our men and women in uniform. And they literally have those people waiting, changing clothes 4 separate times. And then afterwards, at the time she's telling her daughter, the Libyan president, the Egyptian prime minister, it's a terror attack, she's telling the American people a totally different story. Now, she said in the beginning she did this because she wanted the convenience of one device. Well, it turns out she had multiple devices. It turns out she had multiple servers. It turns out she decided on her own, and nobody even read what the 30,000+ emails were that they ended up deleting on their own, that she claims were about a wedding, a funeral, yoga, and conversations with Bill, who doesn't email. So there's a lot of lying going on here and a lot of covering up here. So what are we to make of what Comey did?
Well, look, I mean, the first thing you know is that no normal American could have done this without very, very severe legal consequences, and that this is just further proof of the corruption and the sickness of the city. I mean, if Comey come back and said, we looked at everything. We couldn't find anything that was really wrong. That's one thing. But and I don't know what was going on in his head. I mean, to give us that initial 15 minutes, she did this wrong, she did this wrong, she did this wrong, she did this wrong, she did this wrong. Oh, and by the way, I wouldn't recommend indictment.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the weirdest presentations I've ever seen, because it guarantees that most Americans are going to listen to the first 15 minutes and conclude that she is extraordinarily guilty. And they're going to wonder what's going on in his head. How could he say all of that and then come back and say that she shouldn't be prosecuted?
Can you answer your own question then? That's a good question.
No. I mean, I think it's, I don't know whether Comey felt compelled to say that she's not going to be indicted, but he wanted the country to know how sick it was, or whether he's just conflicted internally, because everything he laid out is a case for indictment. I mean, these things are clear, gross violations of the law, and they're violations on a grand scale. I mean, if a normal person did this, at a minimum, they'd lose their security clearance, they'd pay a very severe fine, they would get a suspended sentence. That's the minimum. At a maximum, they'd go to jail for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And to lay this out, and the people, and I'm watching as various people start to write and speak out, I mean, including a guy, for example, who spent 2.5 years in jail, who worked for the CIA, has said, how come I got that sentence and she gets this? And I think you're going to find over the next few days the number of people, Comey says, we couldn't find any precedent for pursuing this. Well, wait till he sees how many people have been prosecuted, what they've been prosecuted for.
Don't you think he had to know that ahead of time, or he doesn't know that ahead of time? I mean, I've got this guy. Is there equal justice under the law or not? Because it appears.
Well, and the answer in this administration and in the Clinton administration is no. I mean, there's an elite law, which is you get away with virtually anything, and there's the rest of us, which is you're a real risk. I mean, you look at what happened to Scooter Libby, who was a great American, a patriot, Dick Cheney's chief of staff, went to jail for a totally phony, framed job by an independent counsel that we now know. There's a New York Times reporter who was locked up for 85 days as the prosecutor tried to coerce her into testifying, has come out and said flatly that the prosecutor told her, in effect, she was never getting out of jail unless she lied under oath that Scooter was guilty of something. Now, you look at what Scooter suffered for being a conservative, for being in favor of trying to do what President Bush wanted to do, and you look at what's happening with Hillary Clinton, you cannot. This is worthy of Venezuela or Cuba or some other banana republic. This is an absolute, total violation of the rule of law, and I think the American people are going to see that, and I think it's going to sicken most people, and frankly, it's going to destroy Comey's reputation because, again, I mean, he could have done one or two things. He could have come out and said, we did a thorough review, there's nothing really wrong, and what can I tell you? Or he could come out and say everything he said today and said, therefore, obviously, she has to be indicted. And just ask yourself one question. Nobody, and this is a point Giuliani made, having in his own career read several thousand security clearances, you couldn't possibly get a security clearance with this report. But she's going to become commander-in-chief.
Let me ask you one political question, because I got to let you go. We have our legal experts coming up at the bottom of the hour. And by the way, you can't blame me for this one. So, but on the front page of the Drudge Report right now is who should be Trump's VP, and there's a poll. And I'm looking right now at the results, and you happen to be in the lead with about 40% of the vote, nearly 100,000 votes. Joni Ernst is second with about 65,000 votes. And then it's Jeff Sessions at 14, and Mike Pence with 7, and Christie with 5, and Corker with 1.5.
First of all, Joni Ernst is a very impressive senator and somebody who served in the military, was a state senator before.
I know she's great, but I mean, do you know if there's any vetting going on?
Well, I certainly hope so.
It's really unfair. Yeah, it's unfair because I'm not going to go in much harder because of our decades and decades of friendship here. But the question was, are you being vetted?
Oh, you didn't ask that.
Oh, I'm asking it now.
Well, I think they've been very clear all along that I'm one of the 4 or 5 people that they were vetting.
That's fair enough, but
I don't think that's news. I think they've said
when do you think that decision
again.
will be made? Do you think it'll be made at the convention? Will he hold the suspense?
No, first of all, I have no idea because this is not something Trump's going to tell anybody. My guess is that they will do it either Thursday or Friday of next week so that it dominates the weekend news going into the convention. Not next week, but the week before the convention. Either the Thursday or the Friday before the convention, I think, which I guess is next week, will be the right date, because that way you go into the convention with the weekend news all being about the new vice presidential nominee, and we're all going to be happy and we're all going to move forward. And I think that's what Trump will want to achieve. And he's been very good about not letting anybody know.
No, he's really good at it. He really is very good at it.
And he's got a good range of choices. I mean, I look at the people that he's interviewing.
Well, can you give me a heads up, because I have you booked every night for the convention. If you're going to be busy with other things, just let me know. Well,
I suspect, knowing you, that you'll just appeal to the campaign, and even if I'm the vice president nominee, you'll whine and whimper, and I'll show up every night anyway, because I
probably
won't get away from you.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thank you. When we come back, our legal team is next.